What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and welcome back to today's video. We're going to continue our NFL positional tier list rankings with the defensive linemen. Now, heed these words, because I know the comments are going to be like, where's this guy? This is defensive linemen. So these are going to be defensive tackles and 3-4 defensive ends. There will be a separate video for edge rushers. So those are going to be guys that are going to be 3-4 outside linebackers, 4-3 defensive ends. There's two players on this list that are kind of hybrids in Calais Campbell and JJ Watt. They both kind of play a little bit of both, multiple front type guys, and I just, for simplicity's sake, included them in today's video. So this is, it's going to be a hot topic, because really the thing we need to know is that every one of these guys is good within their own way, be it they are already established or they have a very high ceiling. So this is the best of best. When I put a guy in F tier, I'm not saying that they're the bottom tier edge rusher. They're just the bottom tier of the good edge rushers in the NFL. These are not all depth guys. These are all big time playmakers for each of their respected teams. So as usual, when I like doing these videos, I like to set the parameters. I like to give you guys an S tier and an F tier to kind of get what we are working within. So for the S tier, first up, we're going to put Aaron Donald. I mean, he's the best defensive lineman. He's the best defensive player in the National Football League. I think most people can agree upon that. I actually think right now a very interesting debate. I'd like to hear you guys' take in the comments. Who's better, Aaron Donald right now or JJ Watt like 3-4 years ago when JJ Watt was in his prime, or right now Aaron Donald in his prime? Who do you think was the better defensive player? Personally, I'd give the slight edge to JJ Watt, but I think that's one of the healthiest debates going on right now in the great world of professional football. Then for F tier, I mean, we can put the rookies here. Some of the lower tier rookies. The rookies class is so good, though. I'm not putting all the rookies into F tier because I'm higher on some, but we'll take, we got Dexter Lawrence, who's a new member of the New York Giants. We also have, I think, one more, Christian Wilkins, member of the Clemson duo. Christian Wilkins had that funny moment during draft day, body checking Roger Goodell. He will also make this list, but I think the ceiling is high for both of these players. So without further ado, jumping into play number one, we have Jonathan Allen. And I'm going to put him into C tier. John Allen last year, finally starting to put it all together for the Washington Redskins. Their pipeline of Alabama players is kind of panning out. Him and Deron Payne were really good. Honorable mention, not in this video, is Matt Ioannidis from Temple, who's also a member of that Redskins defensive line. They have a very underrated defensive line. But John Allen last year, 11 sacks, 8 sacks, 11 TFLs. Let's get that correct. That's very productive. I mean, he's a little bit of a sleeper. Not enough people give him a lot of credit. I think it's just everyone is kind of down on Washington in general. Maybe bringing in Dwayne Haskins, having that exciting quarterback, might be getting people back on the hype train just a little bit. But I think John Allen is one of the middle tier of the best when it comes to defensive linemen. Next up, we have Geno Atkins, and I'm going to put Geno Atkins right up here into A tier. He's been uber consistent. He's consistently, it must have been the last like 3-4 years. It feels like he's been in double digits for sacks. Last season, he had 10 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. I don't think he's ever, he rarely hurt. He's always on the field. Mr. Reliable for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think, again, a little bit underrated. I don't think he gets nearly enough respect, and I'm definitely putting him into my A tier. Next up, we have Denico Autry, formerly of the Raiders, kind of a little bit of a flyer. Chris Ballard emerging as one of the best GMs in football for the Indianapolis Colts. Gets Autry, and then out of nowhere has a super productive season. I'm about to put him in a C tier just because he's a little bit of a one-hit wonder. But you look at the stats last year, 9 sacks, 13 TFLs, and he wasn't an immediate starter. Hey, he could be one of those guys that's finally just starting to put it all together. So, because he's a little bit of a one-year wonder, he's probably D into C. I feel like C tier is where I'm going to put the guys that had one really big breakout year last season, just because we don't want to overvalue that. But I think Autry could be an emerging stud, an emerging diamond in the rough that was able to get picked up by Chris Ballard off the trash heap and turn into something special there for the Indianapolis Colts. Next up, we have Mr. Brandon Williams of the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to put him F tier. He's still really good. He's just a pure out run stuffer, though. He's never really going to add much to the affecting the pass, getting sacks, stuff like that. But I mean, the Baltimore Ravens have always, it seems like since I've been a football fan, they've always been a pain in the ass to run against, and he is a big reason why. But he's just a limited run stuffer, and not the best run stuffer. Probably third or fourth. He's probably top 5 run stuffer in the league. So that's going to get you about F tier when we're ranking all defensive linemen. We have DeForest Buckner of the San Francisco 49ers, and I'll put him in S tier. Maybe this is overrated. I think he is incredibly dominant. Last season, 12 sacks, 17 tackles for loss on a not very good defensive line. There's a reason why they had to go out and spend a very high pick on Nick Bosa, because literally everything went through him on that defensive line. He was the edge rush, except he was coming from the inside. So freaky production for him, and I think definitely deserves, in my opinion, to be considered amongst the elite of defensive linemen in the National Football League. We have Calais Campbell of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to put him into A tier. Again, you know, his production, he's a hybrid. He's a straight up hybrid, but I felt like it's a little bit weird putting him in as a straight up edge. But his production last season was very good. 10.5 sacks, 20 tackles for loss. 2 years ago, did he actually win? He was runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. I personally thought he should have edged out Aaron Donald. He was simply spectacular. So I'm going to put him in A tier just because I don't really let to hold it against him, but he's not a true, like, he plays defensive end. He's an inside rusher, I guess, is how he can make this list and won't be grouped in with the edges. But he's definitely an A S tier. You know, he's a hybrid. He can move between both tiers. But for right now, I'm gonna put him as a very high A, almost an S. I just didn't want too many S tiers. Next up, we have Jarrell Casey of the Tennessee Titans. I'm gonna put him B tier. I know he's one of the most underrated players, and yeah, he's underrated. But the fact that he's been underrated his whole career, I think, you know, maybe he's slightly overrated by the fan base. He's still very, very good. He absolutely pushed the shit in on the Philadelphia Eagles when they played the Titans and lost to them in overtime. Last season, he had 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. He's been really, really good, really, really consistent. And kind of like Geno Atkins, Mr. Reliable, hasn't missed a whole lot of time for the Tennessee Titans. So he's a high B tier defensive lineman. We have Kenny Clark up next from the Green Bay Packers. He's going to go B tier. One of the better young nose tackles in the National Football League. Very athletic. 6 sacks, 8 tackles for loss last season. Was definitely the shining star, if you will, of the Green Bay Packers defensive line. We also have Mike Daniels here. You know, he's starting to show his age a little bit. I'm going to put him at D tier. Just because we're on the word of Green Bay Packers. I think Kenny Clark has surpassed him as the best player on that defensive line. But Mike Daniels still can take over games, sets at edge as good as anyone in the National Football League. So we're still going to put him at D tier for the best of the best. We have Fletcher Cox of the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm putting him in S tier. Last season for the Eagles, he had 10.5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. He's a Pro Football Focus darling. He's incredibly disruptive. And I think there was that stretch. It was one of those, you know, you don't want to say he's player dependent, but I feel like if Timmy Jernigan, he had a lot more responsibility when Timmy Jernigan stepped out of the Eagles lineup, because he had to do everything. He had to be our run stuffer. He had to be the guy that goes after the quarterback, and he had to do, you know, when he had Timmy Jernigan there, that he really took off. And you know, I think this upcoming season you're gonna see a big year from Fletcher Cox. I could definitely see him getting something similar, maybe to what Chris Jones did last season with the Kansas City Chiefs. But Fletcher Cox is an absolute god, and there's a reason why, Eagle non-bias aside, most people think he is the second best defensive lineman across the NFL after Aaron Donald. But you know, in reality, Aaron Donald is like a higher than S tier for this list. Next up, we have Javon Hargrave for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm gonna put him F tier. I think he's emerging. He's pretty solid. Had somewhat surprising stats when I looked at it last year. 6.5 sacks, 6 TFLs as a starting nose tackle there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he's definitely trending towards D, because he's been pretty decent. He's been, you know, on the incline for the last couple of years for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I want to see another year of production until I can bump him up my tiers. We have Snacks Harrison here for the Detroit Lions. I'm going to put him A tier. He is the best run-stuffing defensive lineman in the National Football League. I'm going to reward that. While the stacks and the tackles for loss might not be amazing, last season he had 0 sacks, 4 tackles for loss. This guy here instantly made Detroit one of the best run-stuffing teams when he got acquired in that trade from the New York Giants. And, you know, you got to show some respect to that. And the fact that he is easily the best at his position at what he does, I'm going to have to put him up into A tier. We have Cam Hayward of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to put him A tier. Incredibly, I think he's a little bit of a fringe between B and A, but 2 years ago, his stats were ridiculous. Last season, I mean, it's not all about stats, but it's a good reference point. Last season, he had 8 sacks, 10 tackles for loss for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been very good for like the really last 4 or 5 years. So we're going to put him up there into A tier, put some respect there. We have Akeem Hicks of the Chicago Bears. I'm going to put him B tier. Last season for the Bears, a little bit of a breakout year, starting to get a lot more recognition last season. Helps that Khalil Mack was there, so more eyes were watching that defense, and then really got the praise that he deserves. Last season, 7.5 sacks, 12 TFLs. So, you know, if we're reviewing this halfway through next season and he puts up that level of production again, I think we might be able to talk about him as an A-tier defensive lineman. For right now, we have him as a strong B. We have Mo Hurst here of the Raiders. I'll put him F tier. He's the bright spot of that defensive line for the Raiders last season that was desperately missing Khalil Mack. But the fact that, you know, he had that issue, I don't know if it was a heart issue, something like that, that caused him to fall from the first round, which is where most people had him projected, to the 5th. It's a feel-good story, and I think he's only going to get better for the Raiders. We have Malik Jackson for now the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm going to put him F tier. He's kind of one-dimensional, really got exposed against the run last season, but for an inside rusher, he is really, really good. So I got to put a little bit of respect there because, you know, outside of last year, you know, since he's gone and had that huge year in his final year of his contract with the Denver Broncos, he's definitely been one of the best pass rushers from the inside defensive line in the National Football League. We have Grady Jarrett now from the Atlanta Falcons. I'm gonna put him C tier right now. Maybe that's underrating him just a little bit. Last season, 6 sacks, 8 tackles for lost. I believe it was a franchise tag. I don't think they worked out a long-term deal yet. He's really good, undersized defensive tackle, very athletic. I think, you know, again, halfway point, we might be able to review this again and get him up into B tier. But for right now, I think he's about middle of the park when you're talking about the elite defensive lineman in the National Football League. Chris Jones from the Kansas City Chiefs. He's going S tier. He was simply incredible last season. 15.5 sacks, 19 tackles for loss. Good God. Good God. On a defense that literally had caused every single opponent they played to get into a shootout. The fact that he was still able to be as productive as he was when really that back end, that secondary was not holding up. He didn't have a whole lot of time to affect the pass. It wasn't like, you know, coverage sacks or like that were few and far between for the Kansas City Chiefs. The fact that he was able to kind of have the dominant season that he did is very, very commendable. And I'm going to respect him and put him up into S tier. We have Linval Joseph. I'm going to put Linval Joseph into C tier. You know, never going to have really, really good stats, but I think he is one of the best run stuffing nose tackles in the National Football League. Last season, he had 1 sack, 4 TFLs, a little bit of a down year. He's probably, you know, fringe right now between D and C. I don't know if he's starting to show his age a little bit, but generally that Vikings defense was a little disappointing last season. But Linval Joseph, for the better part of the last 3-4 years, has been one of the best nose tackles in the National Football League. What do we got here next? We got Gerald McCoy. I'm going to take Gerald McCoy. I'm going to put him... we'll put him D tier for right now. A little bit of a down season last year. 6 sacks, 6 TFLs. Ended up getting cut as the Bucs are going a new direction. Right now remains without a team. So, I mean, you know, he is starting to show his age just a little bit, but he's still, you know, he can still go off. He can still dominate a game. So I'm going to put him at D tier right now. We have Larry Ogunjobi. I'm gonna put Ogunjobi in C tier. I've liked him a whole lot. I had him as one of my best defensive linemen in the draft. Where he's coming out? He's coming out. Oh, was it William Mary? Charlotte, I think, if I had to guess. But last season for the Cleveland Browns, 5.5 sacks, 10 TFLs. So kind of like Danico Autry, one big year. Let's see if you can remain that consistent, or maybe take your game to the next level and continue to move up the tiers. But right now, C tier for Ogunjobi. We have Ed Oliver, and unlike the other rookies, I'm going to put Ed Oliver and Quinnen Williams both into D tier. I think they're going to hit the ground running for the respected teams, and you know, powerful rookies. From the fact that for most of these rookies have been just generally going in F tier because we have to wait and see. I'm very hyped on Ed Oliver and Quinnen Williams to really just take over this upcoming season. Next up, we have Daron Payne for the Washington Redskins. I'm going to put him F tier for now. Last season, 5 sacks, 6 TFLs. He's emerging. You know, it was a toss-up between either putting him on the list or Matt Ioannidis. I didn't want to put 3 Washington Redskins to inflate the list, but I think Daron Payne was a good pick. I mean, the Alabama pipeline is real. Him and Jonathan Allen, the chemistry seemed very, very good, and he's definitely going to build upon this and move up these tiers if what we saw last season was any indication of how his career is going to go. Next up, we have Michael Pierce of the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to put him in C tier. He could very well be B tier. He is really, really good against the run. I think in terms of 3-4 defensive ends against the run, you know, he's top three probably in the league. I just feel like because he's kind of one-dimensional, he's never, even though he is a defensive end, he's never really going to affect the pass. He has, you know, I'm going to hold that against him a little bit. The fact that I feel like C being a middle tier 4 defensive linemen that are elite. I feel like that's probably fair for a guy that's just really, really good at stuffing the run. So I'm going to put him here at C tier. We have Sheldon Rankins of the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to put him actually in B tier here. 8 sacks, 12 tackles for loss last season. Was a huge reason why I think the Saints struggled in that championship game, because he had a really bad injury against the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think emerging stud. I've been a big fan of him ever since he came out of Louisville, and the Saints got a good one. We have Jarron Reed of the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to put Jarron Reed into C tier again. The guys that had breakout years. Let's see if they can keep that consistency up. Jarron Reed, 10.5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss last season. That is an insane year, insane production from another great Alabama defensive lineman. So let's see if he can keep that consistency up and move up the list. Next up, we have Sheldon Richardson. I'm going to put him F tier. I mean, he hasn't really played the same since he was really, really good with the Jets. He's bounced around to a couple teams. Now he's with the Cleveland Browns. Him and Larry Ogunjobi should be very optimistic if you are a Browns fan. But I need to see, get back to that old form for him to move up this tier list. We have Kawan Short of the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to put him B tier for right now. Last season, Kawan Short, 3 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. A little bit of a down year, but he's been very, very consistent, kind of like Jarrell Casey a little bit. Didn't have a whole lot of help. That defensive line for the Panthers last season wasn't as good as it has been in years past. So I think for right now, he's probably a B, C tier type guy. And, name recognition, all that stuff. Previous success, he's had a lot of huge seasons over the last 3-4 years. Yeah, we have him right here in B tier. Next up, we have Ndamukong Suh. I'm going to put him D tier. He's still really, really good, but he has kind of dropped off just a little bit in production. I thought he would be utterly dominant with Aaron Donald with the Rams, and kind of fell behind, and Aaron Donald lived in his shadows just a little bit. So we're gonna keep him in D tier, even though he is one of my favorite players in the National Football League. We have Dalvin Tomlinson of the Giants. Put him F tier. Let's see what he can do. Change of position now. I think they're gonna have Dexter Lawrence as the nose tackle, so he's going to move to be a 3-4 defensive end. BJ Hill, honorable mention to make this list too on the Giants. I think both those guys are roughly around F tier. We have Vita Vea. He's going to go F tier. Decent production for a guy that struggled to stay healthy last season. 3 sacks, 4 tackles for loss. Let's see if he can build upon that. We have JJ Watt. JJ Watt's going S tier. Finally getting back to his old self. 16 sacks, 18 TFLs last year. And like I said, man, that's the debate. Outside of this list, which is going to cause a debate, what would you got? Like I said, prime JJ Watt, prime Aaron Donald. Who would you take on your team if you could pick one of those players right now? Then we have finishing up Leonard Williams of the Jets. I'm going to put him, he's going to be a D. He's going to be a fringe C type player. Just a little bit of a down year last year. 5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. I think the addition of Quinnen Williams is going to help him out a lot. Greg Williams coming over as DC. She'll get creative to free up him and Quinnen, just wreak havoc on opposing quarterbacks. But until we see that proof on the field, we're going to have to kind of hold him accountable for the little bit of the slide that he has had on the defensive line over the last 2 seasons. So there you go, guys. Those are my tier list for defensive linemen in the National Football League. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comment section below. And we'll be back, in a couple days' time talking about maybe edge rushers. That's what we'll do next. If your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace